Hi and welcome back to another video of JPlay. I received Arydia a couple of weeks ago. I have to confess, so it was sitting on my pile of shame for way too long, I suppose. The main reason for that is it came at the wrong time because, as you may know, I do already have some campaign games that I have started and that I want to play. I mean, it's a game designed by Cody Miller and I'm a huge fan of Sire. I played it on the channel at least once and I played it with my friends several times and I will still continue to enjoy this. While Sire is pretty much really a sandbox, completely open universe kind of game, this one is a very story-driven campaign game, and I think replayability is relatively minimal because a lot of these events, a lot of these encounters are very much pre-scripted. In some instances, I believe even where those monsters are being spawned is defined by the respective maps, for example. And usually if you watch my channel, you might know that I prefer typically sandbox kind of games, so I always want to find my next Eldritch Arkham Horror or maybe stuff like Fortune and Glory. You get the idea. But of course, again, so much love went into Arydia, so I asked some of my patrons if they were interested in seeing at least some bits and pieces of Arydia here, and there was definitely some demand for it out there, which ultimately made me consider, okay, let's maybe play through the quick start guide. First of all, it doesn't really spoil all that much because that will what you always will do, and there are really not an awful lot of surprises. Yes, you will see some of the characters, some of the so-called paths that we are going to play, but this is, I think, very much unlike a Gloomhaven, for example, where you are allowed to look at a lot of these things basically in advance, right? Even though there will be spoilers, absolutely, even in this one here. Not even sure if I will play through the full quick start guide or if I will basically show you some minor things, maybe one battle, and even in the battle there is something. On the first combat you can basically combat 3 times or up to 4 times actually, depending on how many players you play the game with. But yeah, ultimately what I'm trying to say with this long introduction is I will go into the quick start guide, and if there is a tremendous interest out there, I might really consider playing through, not really through the campaign, but at least play for some time. Of course, if it's really huge, then I'm happy to play this for you. But yeah, that's basically where I'm coming from. So if you don't want any spoilers at all, then stop here, stop now. And because I already mentioned my patrons, huge shout out to those, and my channel members here as well. You guys are amazing. Can't tell you how much I appreciate all your support. I already prepared some stuff in the background, but the first thing that you typically do when you start a new campaign is to read Event 000 Dawn. The paths we dare tread, the words echo in your mind. You blink back sleep as dawn pours into your threadbare tent. Exile isn't nearly as romantic as it sounds. Today is the great thaw. The hunt should start soon. With a little luck, your training will pay off and you'll be home before harvest. The last 2 weeks have been grueling, but your mind and body have begun to toughen. You affix the brass pin to your chest and think about the path you've chosen. Each player now chooses a path and creates a character. See quick start guide. I already did that, and I did something I wasn't supposed to do because the rules strongly suggest that if you play this game alone, you should also only play that with just one character. Because I really like to think of Arydia as really this kind of RPG party kind of game, and as I want to see a lot of these capabilities, I believe there are 3 more paths out there, and I didn't get the expansion, by the way, and something I did the same mistake with Sire back in the day actually. I backed it. Anyway, I wanted to see some stuff and I want a good mix of things. So we have a halfling, which I believe is now the path of shadow over here. We have an elf character, Valanduin. It's a she. I'm not sure if I'm using these names correctly, but it is what it is. She's following the path of light, somewhat of a priest, of a monk kind of character. Not sure if this was my best choice here, but I will go with it right for now. And we have our human path of Valor character here, Sailda, this guy over here. Yeah, he's our fighter, basically. There is some things in this game which is referred to be role-playing points, and this is stuff that you read to other characters, similar what you should do in Arydia. Someone is reading the encounter for you. Obviously, this is something I have to do for myself, but I'm really not concerned about spoilers, quite honestly. I do not really care the least about spoilers in all of these games. I couldn't care less, really. That's who I am. I'm really okay, and as I'm really old enough, I tend to forget a lot of stuff anyway. So these are our 3 characters. There are additional boards for those. So here, for example, Valanduin, we have her, I don't know, equipment board. So this is where we have her actions, where we have her practice staff, the practice gambeson, for example. We have the same for the other 2 characters here as well. So I did all of that, and I will not dive into the details. We are not going to read all of those backstories for those characters here. Again, if I really move on and continue playing, then maybe yes, we might have to dive in a little bit more into the lore of this whole piece, but for now, let's simply take this as some kind of a demo, and I'm relatively certain you have already seen an awful lot of those, and I believe Colin and Bernd are also doing a series with Arydia on the Meet Me at the Table channel. Big shout out here. So that's basically it for the character creation. We will dive into a lot of these special abilities, into their equipment anyway when we go through the quick start guide here, so bear with me here. But we have basically completed our character setup. Each year, emissaries are dispatched to a chosen region, distributing wooden coins to the local inhabitants. These coins, called squills, hold no value, but they are the only way for the banished to receive a pardon. Exiles must prove their worth, collect the most quills by harvest, and you can return home. How lovely is that? You won't be alone in the hunt. Other exiles will be competing for pardons as well. The laws stipulate that exiles may band together in parties no larger than 4 members. What a coincidence. Pooling resources to gain a group pardon. You think it's time to size up the competition and maybe find some allies. And by the way, here is a wooden model of those squills. Nice touch, doesn't serve any purpose as far as I understood, but that's again how you see how much love goes into this game, and really, Cody, great. Nicely done. Flip hex E2 and place party token on this, then banish this card. So yes, it is a campaign game, it is a legacy game. You're not tearing these cards apart. There is an easy way to reason, it takes some time maybe, but you can reset the game relatively easily without using any kind. You can replay the game. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So let's banish this event and flip over E2 and this satisfying sound. I believe this is a triple layered board. It's really incredible. Exiles camp, so we are placing our little marker on it here, our party marker. This is a metal token, by the way, and if you know Sire and the metal coins they were using, the best coins ever in a board game, we also have some more of these here. That's, I think, K, which is the normal currency of this game. So we have fully resolved our very first event here, and I'm not going to read through the quick start guide paragraph by paragraph. I really still try to play this for you, so it's at least somewhat interesting to watch. Okay, now we can interact with the world basically. So we are in adventure mode, I believe, and we have some point of interest here on this piece. So we have Big 01, we have a guild, we have point of interest 1. In this case, we are going to encounter Big 1, which is our very first map of the game. And here's the front or back side, depends on how you want to look at it, for the Exiles camp. Beautiful artwork. We even get an indicator which tune to play. You get these tunes from Far Off Games website. I haven't used them. I'm not going to use them for this video. I don't really know about all the rights to these songs, so that's why I will leave this out of here. But we have some introduction here. Threadbare tents stand here, flaps swaying lightly in the breeze. As you draw nearer, the din of the camp washes over you. Voices buzz in excitement, swords clang in practice, and as you approach, a mustached man beckons you. So now we have to flip this one over. That's what we see here. And that's now the actual map. First of all, we have to set our character minis here as close as possible to our exit point. So this leads back to the world map basically. So we're placing one here. We have Shoutout here. Arydia is actually our halfling. And we have Valanduin. I really have to get used to these names. I think we are going to place her here because these black borders here are a little bit more problematic. We have obscure borders, we have difficult borders, but as long as we are in adventure mode, I believe it doesn't really matter too much. Next, because we have an unexplored event, we will place an event marker right next to it. We do have some NPCs waiting over here. We will deal with all of those in a minute, but that's basically the setup for the first map done. We have placed our characters, we have seeded the board. If there would have been enemies, we would have spawned some enemies right now. So we are now basically dealing with this first map of the game. Because I mentioned this already, we are in adventure mode right now. We can more or less freely move around the map. So there are no game turns, no game rounds whatsoever. Things will change once we move into the combat mode, which happens, yeah, when we are entering combat, right? Makes perfect sense. So right now we can more or less freely move around the map. We can prepare things. We can position our characters the way we want to because we maybe suppose something is about to happen. So all the things can be done more or less willy-nilly, freely. So whatever, we can move him here, we can move her here, and we maybe want to move her here. That's fully legal, but of course, let's not do that too crazy right now. And I think that was what it was, or how it was. So I guess let's start talking to this non-player character over here. And again, we can move things around. If we only want to interact with Sailor here, for example, we can move him here and leave all the others back there. But I think in this case, it doesn't really matter too much. We all want to talk. We are all equal. We don't have any sort of hierarchy here. We all want to be placed next to NPCs. So we all want to be part of this discussion. It could matter, maybe it doesn't. But one player needs to be the so-called active player for this action. As I'm playing alone, I'm the active player, and my left neighbor typically would be my guide, because this guide would gain then role-playing points and all kinds of stuff. In this case, I think I will simply assign these randomly. So I will say who is the guide basically before I get into this. So in this case, let's simply say, yeah, I don't know, let's send out the elf first, and the elf will talk to the NPC, and yeah, I don't know, Sailor here will be the guide. And to make it ultra clear, everything I do here is heavily scripted in the QuickStart guide. I'm not a big fan of these QuickStart guides. I do struggle with the same with Under. I can see the appeal as long as you get a full set of rules. Yes, there is a rule book, but for me, this feels more like a reference guide, actually. Yes, you can. I think you can learn the game through that. But for example, setting up the campaign is something where they tell you have to go through the QuickStart guide. Okay, whining on a very, very high level here. Anyway, Valanduin, right? That's her name. Valanduin is now talking to the NPC. And the way how this works now is the guide would now basically start reading all of those. The things that you see here in bold are basically the responses where the NPC would trigger, and the other player, the active player, would not be supposed to somehow through role playing saying, hey, I'm going to talk to him about this guild here, for example. Again, as I'm playing alone, it's a little bit difficult, but it's okay. You don't have to leave them out. If they really not come to the trigger points here, you can really tell them, hey, you have these 4 trigger points in this here. So it's still supposed to be fun, right? We are not playing a point and click adventure here. Okay, we have the guild leader Thades, a weather-beaten man, stands here watching exiles practice. He turns to you as you approach. After all that training, the day has arrived. Time to get out there and do the guild proud. If you want a little warm-up before you go hunting squirrels, you can fight the practice dummy one more time. Let me know when you are ready to leave. So again, now the other player, in this case Zelda, would now maybe guess around, hey, what about the arrival? And then we would say, oh, I don't have a trigger word for that, so we would read that seems to fall outside my recollection. So basically your standard go-to answer, the catch-all. But I think in this case, because again we are playing alone, why not ask about the guild first, just to give you some background of what's going on here. But in this case there is not really an awful lot to... I think we learned something, but there is nothing that would now change the game, it seems. The guild was established as a means for exiles to prove their value in order that they might earn a pardon and return home. To this end, guild members work hard for the locals who give them squills. Now we flip back and the conversation continues. Let's ask about those squills. Squills are wooden coins given to exiles in exchange for help. Your goal is to collect the most squills by harvest in order to receive a pardon. I think we already know that. Then we might ask, hey, what is this practice dummy you were talking about? I was working on a more powerful dummy, one that could really challenge you, but it's gone missing. Anyway, the old one still works fine. When you're ready, head up to the field and I'll get you going. This symbol here is now a role-playing point. We will award that role-playing point to the guide, basically. In this case, I think it was Valor, no, Zelda was the guide in this case, or maybe I'm mixing things up. So I will assign it now to one of the heroes. So in this case, Zelda, and because we are playing 3 or more players in this campaign, we only have 1 slot here. And we can spend this to get a +3 on any of basically a test that we are about to do. When you play solo, you get all 3 of those. So this is how the game somewhat balances, I suppose. But again, we are playing a 3-player game. We only have 1 slot each, but I certainly take that. Of course, if no one would have asked about the practice dummy, the active player, because they couldn't care less, then we also wouldn't have received that role-playing point here. And this is, I believe, where the game shines more with 2, 3, 4 players than an actual solo game. But then again, I'm not really sure if that matters too much. And the rules tell you shouldn't ad-lib or so. I think you also shouldn't say, hey, ask about this thing here. But ultimately, you can still give them the option, and yeah, you will get there. I'm not really sold on these role-playing points, quite honestly. But okay, we just learned that there is something to explore up north, and we do see another map being mentioned here. But because we still have an uncleared map, we can't explore any further. And the uncleared map currently comes from this event marker here. So in order to explore, we have to resolve either all the enemies and all these event markers. Before Walanduin was our active player, let's assign this now, I don't know, to Arydia, our shadow character here. So I think we want to do the same thing. I guess we want to be around this marker here as well, right? We want to deal with this event marker. So first of all, we are removing it now. The map is in theory cleared. And next we will trigger event 13. Around the camp. So I ask him where he got the fish. The small crowd erupts with laughter as you draw nearer. A tall man with long blonde hair is at the center of attention. He eyes you cautiously as you approach. It's good to see new faces. Where have you been exiled from? Let's say from the city, right? This does make sense. Let's flip it over, and it's any answer in this case. Ah, yes, I should have guessed. By the smell. More laughter. The man slaps his companion on the back and they saunter off chortling. The crowd begins to disperse. Exiles mill about tightening packs, sharpening swords and preparing for the day ahead. Nice. So now we do get our very first experience point, and we all get this experience point. That is nice. And then we are also banishing this card. Again, this quick start guide is supposed to tell you what could happen, what you can expect from those. But yeah, we will learn more about those when we get through that. But for now, let's assign 1 experience point to all our characters here. And in case you're wondering how many XPs do I need, or experience points do I need, that's basically outlined here on the backside of our, I think it's our race. for lack of a better term here. So we have 3 experience points to move into level 1, 5 to level 2, and so on. And then all kinds of stuff will happen. And I believe you do a level up at the very end of this quick start guide. At least I think it's at the very end. Okay, so we have now cleared the map. So let's explore up north. We want to find out about this practice dummy, I suppose. We will assign a new first player or an active player. And I think in this case, let's give this, I mean, it's a fighty thing. We will hand things over now to Zelda. So we are moving up here. I think let's do, because we are still in adventure mode, we can move around with the other characters as well before we then actually say, now we are going to explore. We know what needs to be explored. It's a medium-sized map and it's basically index 0. And here is again the back or front side here of the practice field. You see a small clearing where the ground has been well worked by exiles practicing all forms of combat. All right, you're next. You walk over and take your place. Thales starts the practice dummy. It wheels out from around the pond and it begins to wobble towards you. Start this combat on any space adjacent to starting point X. So now we are flipping this one over. We will align the big or medium and medium map pointers here respectively. And combat is now in this example a little bit differently because every character now has their own little script they go through to more or less go through this combat here. So we are not fighting them all together. Everyone has their own little combat here. So I think in this case, I don't really know. I went through the path of Valor combat example, and because maybe I want to explore something else, let's move, I don't know, Arydia up maybe to one of these spots. Again, I don't know. I think I may have been told where I should start, but again, we will do that basically adjacent to this X here. And of course, we should not forget to flip the marker now to the combat mode. So things are now getting much more delicate and much more time critical and whatnot. For no apparent reason, I changed my mind. I will start combat over here. And here is what we are fighting. It's a gorgeous looking practice dummy. Because we will now pretty much go through 3 simultaneous individual combats. We don't have 3 miniatures, but there are tokens for the other players. And we also have other copies of medium map 0 in this case. But again, I think I'm only doing this once now to sort of familiarize yourself a little bit with the combat mechanic from which I can see. Again, I went through one of these examples, seems to be pretty good. So that's really something that was very nicely designed in this game. So first of all, this card tells us to put out figure 0, and these boxes here, these figure boxes, it's basically a giant envelope. We have 2 of those, and when you're being told to reveal a new one, you basically put them out. Right now I have no clue what other monsters are in here. A practice dummy rolls around here making exaggerated gestures of attack and defense. So here it's basically, we see it's a mob enemy, we see the different fighting things we are doing, we see what happens when we are hitting the critical location right now, and something that would happen, it's just practice if you are defeated by the practice dummy to draw event 12, and we might get some loot out of this. The practice dummy starts exactly here, and that's really one of the things, I don't know if you could have designed it differently. I mean, yeah, I know it's a training and maybe future maps will give you more freedom, more randomization. I don't really know actually, but whatever. So that's basically who we are fighting with. Again, both of my fellow exiles would now do their combat also. We will now also put the combat grid, I believe, next to it. So these are the 8 hit locations. So we basically have to inflict 8 points worth of damage to defeat this sucker. Maybe even 9, because we do have a shield there actually. And I think I have to place 1 cube on it right away. So in order to inflict damage here, we have to first remove that shield marker there. Also very nicely done. Here's basically the AI stuff. So what is the thing doing? But now we can actually start our combat. The enemies or the foes always go first, and you are normally supposed to draw one of these threat cards here in order to see what they do. The QuickStart guide tells you which card to reveal, but again, I will play this a little bit surprising for you. So the first threat card that we are resolving right now is the boss, or we are raising the threat level here according, because we are not fighting a boss, we are fighting a mob in this case. The threat will increase by 1 on this slightly warped combo and threat trackers here. That's always a risk with this dual layered things. I'm relatively certain we can sort this out, not a big deal, but it's really the only piece where I have seen this actually. Everything else seems to be very much fine. But that's basically it. We are not doing anything because we didn't activate our combat type. We simply increased the threat level, which is kind of the currency for the enemies. They need these threat points in order to trigger their actions. But okay, that was the entirety of our foe. Now it's our turn. We as the exile get to activate. In order to do stuff, we have to use our normal action markers or our minor action markers. It's, yeah, the QuickStart guide walks you through. Apart from that, a lot of these things are not fully clear, but I think we are going to start with a minor action, which is this one down here. We are placing it on the feet, which will then ultimately generate 3 movement points, and unfortunately it's not being outlined here. Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. And I think we are also going to spend 1 stamina point to increase our movement points to 5 in total. So 3 from the basic movement, which we can trigger either through a minor or a normal action, plus we can increase this by spending 1 stamina point here accordingly. With a basic move action, you always generate combo points, and these combo points are usually shared between the exiles, but again, I'm playing this now on my own through this example here. The same is true for the threat. It's a combined threat for all the foes that are out on the board. So anytime you are moving, and that's the main way how you generate those combo points, you get these combo points, which you can then ultimately spend to do more powerful stuff and whatnot. So now we do have 5 movement points, and moving over a single line is 1 movement point, moving over an obscure line is 1 movement point, moving over those is basically 2 movement points. So we are jumping over this log, it seems. So we are spending 1, 2 movement points, 4 movement points because it's difficult terrain, and 5 movement points to move us right in front of that practice dummy. Then I think it's time to start an attack. So we are using a normal action to use our practice dagger. We would now be supposed to roll our 20-sided die, and we would be adding our, in this case, what is it, dexterity accordingly. We do have, in fact, dexterity of 1, so we have a bonus, but now really the rules tell me that I have rolled a 4, and I don't want to roll 20-30 times until we get a 4. So that's basically happening. So we rolled a 4 plus the dexterity of 1 down here, which is a 5. And when you now look at our dagger, we see an awful lot of information. So we triggered the action, that much is clear. Now we see how successful was our attack. In total, we have a 5, which means we are allowed to basically only go for this first stage of damage down here, which is definitely kind of a bummer. If we would have rolled a 12 plus, we would be doing both points worth of damage here. This diagram up here tells me that we have to be basically adjacent. This piece we can move around or rotate around wherever we see fit, so we don't have to exactly whatever attack from this position. This could be here as well. So this piece you can rotate. The damage down here, this is really set and carved in stone. This is a path we have to follow. But because we have a very swifty and nimble dagger, we can use the axe, and I believe the axe isn't any location. It's basically an aimed hit, and I think again we can now start anywhere. If we would have rolled higher, this would be our starting point, and from the starting point we would move then to the top right of it. So if we would go in this here, for example, we would then move to the top right. for an example. In this case, let's inflict our first point of damage to that practice dummy here. 7 more to go. Cool stuff, but of course we have already triggered or used up 2 of our action points here. But of course we still do have an action, and I think it's time to use our backstep here. It's denoted here. It's an action. It needs a normal action here. The sneak we could have done with a minor action here, but we have already used the minor action to move, right? But that's totally fine. We are going for the backstep here. We still have to spend 1, and I keep forgetting what the MPs are actually, mana points. Oh, we are really spending mana points for that. So we are moving 1 point down here to trigger that. There is, let's say, a further requirement on this skill, which we can see on this grid here. So we couldn't use backstep if there would be enemies in this or that position here respectively. So in this case, if someone would be behind us, that would have been fine, but basically these fellas here would have, I don't know, protected the guy in the middle here. So we are not hitting, unfortunately, so we are not getting a +20 to the roll, but the rules tell me that I have now rolled a 15. How cool is that? Yeah, that's amazing. We are still adding our dexterity of 1, which is a 16. So we are moving into the middle tier of this attack. And this attack now really tells you we have to start from the top of this combat grid and move our way down depending on how much damage we did. We are in the second tier here, which means we are doing the white damage and we are doing the light gray damage here respectively. And one thing I forgot, it was also piercing damage, which you can barely see. It has a light blue outline here. Good that I'm reading those quick start guides. So I think we will start here from top down to bottom. We have done 2 points worth of damage starting in this column here. Because it's piercing damage, we can ignore the armor. So this is already out. Cool stuff. But we did trigger the weak point here, I believe, or it's a weak point, exactly. And those enemies tell you what happens when you hit their weak point. In this case, we are simply increasing the threat by 1. Now that we are out of actions, we are basically ending our turn. We are moving back to the foe. They always go first, and normally if we would do a normal multiplayer combat here, the foe would now activate again, and then the player to our left would take their exile turn respectively. But again, we are now basically simulating a solo battle here. So this is the next threat card, and yes, in this case we either activate the mob or we increase the threat. In this case we do deal with the mob, and I believe there are only these type of enemies out right now, mobs or bosses, if I recall that correctly. I could be wrong. Maybe this changes over time, but in this case, yes, we already have some threat points, which means we will trigger the mob, in this case, the practice dummy. So the practice dummy will now spend as many threat points as possible to trigger, I guess, the most powerful action they can do. Right now we are at 2, which means they can't go for the last one. In this case, they will go for the whack. So they will spend 1 threat point here. And when you check what the whack is doing, in order to whack us, they need to be 1 space away from us. So this clearly tells by this script, though they can't stand right next to us. But they get 6 movement points from this. So in theory, they could move 1, 2, 3 movement points in here and whack us there, but they can't whack above these, I think, unpassable terrains or whatever this is called. These are these longer lines here, so this doesn't work, but they can do something else. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, so they are behind us. I believe there is no facing in this game, unless I missed that now, but that's basically the position that they're in. That's how they move. They have used all their movement points here, and then they will go for the whack attack, which is this one. This whack attack now tells us which hit die they are going to roll, and this is also another very cool mechanic. These hit dice come in different colors, and they all hit in, let's say, slightly different locations. And you always see that what this die is potentially able to hit. Only these top 4 slots on us they could hit. With a blue die, it's different. So the 6 points here at the sides, for example. They will target our arms and our hands, for example. So that's really nicely done. I love that a lot. So again, they're rolling that red die in this case, and in theory they would inflict 1 point worth of damage, not just in theory, also practically. So let's suppose they would have rolled this one here. So this is now our hit location they are going to hit. Again, they are hitting us for 1 in this case. They're not gaining any bonuses here, so this down here would have given them a bonus damage. So we kind of dodged that bullet here. And because the practice dummy hit us at this location here, which is where we happen to have our practice shirt, the practice shirt will basically, yeah, more or less reduce the damage by 1. That's the shield value here. But when this happens, we also have to wear it down. So we have to place a wear marker here. The practice shirt unfortunately only takes 1 point of wear. So this is now pretty much out of commission until we repair it, for example. But because all the damage was sucked up, we basically can call the attack a no success here. Cool. Okay, then it's our turn again. We will reset all our actions. Oops, I almost did that incorrectly. Of course, we still have our practice kunai up here. And I think we are triggering a normal action here first. And with this normal action, we are going to move. Because we moved, we gain 1 combo point here. And let's simply move 1, 2 spaces up here. We don't have to spend all our movement points here. And that's also the reason why we're not spending any more stamina points. So we are simply standing here for now. Then I think it's time to use our character to the fullest. So we are going for a sneak. So we have to trigger it with a minor token here. And we also have to spend 1 combo point in order to trigger that. So we are back down to only 1, but this now allows us to hide. You are hidden, so we are gaining 3 movement points out of that, and we can only do that if there are no enemies around us, right? That's what we see from this diagram here. We can also spend 1 surge to move 5 movement points instead, but I think we don't have to do that. So we will now exchange our mini with this, I think it's an alert token or so. So the enemy now thinks we are here, but we are moving now, I think, 1, 2 spaces over here. When I say I think, it's the QuickStart guide that tells me what to do in this case. So anything clever you see was scripted by Cody or one of his minions or partners or whatever. So we are down to 1 action, and I think it's time to lay some traps. So we are placing 2 of our practice traps. We have a card that explains, and we have a card for each of those equipment items, I believe. So we have to be hidden, and I think we are going to place both of the trap tokens, and we have to place them adjacent to our current position. So I think 1 trap we have to place here because, again, we know that the practice dummy thinks we are here, and the other token I guess we are placing in here in front of us because this is where the practice dummy is right now, right? Okay, I think those were all of our actions, and yeah, the traps on their own don't do anything, but of course on the card it's basically laid out. There is a delayed effect when a foe enters a square adjacent to an armed trap. But I actually do think this is wrong. It's not the adjacent space, it's the same space of the trap. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense, right? But that's basically, again, the end of our turn. We will start, or we'll take a turn now with the practice dummy here, and we are drawing this card here, which is the all foes. And all foes simply means they all would activate. If there would be bosses and mobs, they would all activate, and they will, I believe, start from the initiative rating, which is part of their card. I think foe 0 is, I think, the low. Oh no, this one down here, that's the initiative rating here. So they will now spend the 1 and only threat they have in order to prot. And no, of course not. They are still going to whack in this case. What am I talking about? So they are now moving 6 spaces upward, and then they would whack us. We already know the whack, and with the whack I think they want to go to this space here. They always want to move the shortest distance, so that's something that's how I think you can plan your traps and whatever. So in order to go there, they will have to move 1 step closer to the trap. bam. So we have triggered the trap. So we are basically flipping it over to the, let's call it activated side of things. We rolled a 12, believe it or not. We have a charisma +1, which is then 13, which means we are basically trigger them both. So we start from the bottom, move one step up, and then one to the top left of the damage grid. So let's do that. So in this case, we will start on this space here. Let's have a quick look at the trap again, how we do the direction in this case. So this was our first one. Then we are moving to the top left to do another damage. And because we crossed over one of those critical paths here through this path, we will also inflict one more damage down here. This has really taken me a time to absorb, but now I understood it and it's ingenious. I really like that a lot. So this was the trap fully resolved, and you see we only have 2 more wounds to go. Nicely done. But the activation of the crash test dummy is not done yet. They will still move over here in order to whack our alert mark. Again, they still think we are here. But now I actually did understand, and there is a whole FAQ on all of these cards, which I believe is amazing work. Is a square adjacent to itself? Yes, a trap will attack a foe directly on its square. So it's basically its own square and all adjacent square, which also means that before he's making his attack, this trap is also sprung, so it will hit again. Wow, way to go. But unfortunately, we did roll a 1, which is a natural miss basically. So whatever we do, it's failing. We can still re-roll it, but we can't use any ability that would give any pluses to that. So if we would have a +1 for something, then it's still considered to be a fail again, unless we decide to re-roll it somehow, which I believe right now we can't do. But now finally the dummy is hitting our alert token. It noticed, hey, there is no one, so we are no longer hidden. So now it exactly knows that we are here. But this was already the end of the practice dummy done. Cool. Back to us. We will reset all our actions here, so they all go back. And the trap also happens to come with a reaction. So we can now spend 1 stamina point in order to pick one trap up which is adjacent. So I think let's quickly do that. So we are picking up this track. It will go back to our practice trap. Unfortunately, we are now out of stamina points, so we can't also pick up this trap token. If the combat would end, we can basically reset it for free anyway. Okay, then next let's use our practice kunai with a normal action here, and we have to unfortunately also spend this cube here. We can get the cube back. I think we have to take these are different symbols here. I think we get it back. It's outlined on our rule card here. Let me quickly check that actually. And yeah, this one means out of combat we get to refresh it basically for free. The range of the kunai is 3, and there are a whole set of rules how you can determine line of sight and whatnot. Good news is that we can actually hit it. Normally we can't go through these obscure lines with a ranged attack, but because we are drawing the line from center to center, we are not crossing over these dotted lines. So we are just in range and we can just barely see that. So that is definitely helpful. So we were able to hit it, and wow, we even rolled a natural 20, which is amazing. So we are dealing basically 2 points worth of damage starting from anywhere. It's an aimed attack, and from anywhere we have to move downwards. So let's absolutely do that. Because we rolled a natural 20, we can also gain 2 combo points for that. Lovely. But now it's time to do some damage. So again, we can start anyway and we have to move down. So in this case, we totally will start here, and from there we will move down, which is enough to take out that dummy. Cool stuff. Normally we would now also trigger the weak spot here, but because we killed it, we are not going to trigger that. That extra threat point, for example, could be used by other miniatures which would still be around. So in this case, we were absolutely successful, and we assume that our other exiles were also able to defeat their crash test or practice dummies here accordingly. So it's actually time to get some rewards. Cool. Okay, now we will reset all our markers, and we also regain all our health points, our stamina points and mana points and whatnot. This is something that usually wouldn't happen, but because it was a combat example, we basically supposed that this hasn't happened here. So pretty much we will now gain the combat rewards exactly, but somehow there is a conflicting information here. On the combat rewards it says all stats remain as they were at the end of combat and any wear tokens on armor will persist, which makes sense. Here they say after completing the combat example, you need to reset all your markers and remove any wear tokens. Return the MedCE blah blah dummy tokens. You won't use them again. I think we will leave them here right now. I will have to check that actually, but it doesn't really matter too much at this point in time. No, we are getting our rewards, which is definitely one more experience point here. Of course, for all the exiles, they all fought the crash test dummy. Why do I keep saying practice crash test dummy? Practice dummy. But now anyone of the party will roll a 20-sided die. It's non-attribute test, so I believe we can't really tweak it with our role-playing point, for example. So we have only rolled a 4, unfortunately, which results in 1 extra K. So our first point of currency of the game, we will have to assign it to one of our characters. It doesn't really matter. Let's give it to the greedy silent Ori, our shadow character for now. We might be able to use it a little bit later. Cool. So combat is over. We will return the practice dummy here accordingly. These cards will now get shuffled back into their threat deck. We are flipping over this one. Everything here will also reset. We don't need the eye cards and all this stuff, but that's basically all that happened. I think up next we may want to go for this point of interest here. Not sure who was the next player. Actually, I think we started with him, so let's maybe hand it over back to the elf. So I think they will all move adjacent to this location here. But I believe before we move on now, I will call it for today. It was a relatively long video for me, at least to record, maybe not so long to watch. Let me know if you are interested continuing the quick start guide. There's still a lot of things to explore actually, so we will still see stuff and I will consider that. And from there again, I will also consider to maybe continue our path a little bit. Depending on how things go, I may want to swap out some of the characters if I don't see fit, and there are cool drop in and drop out rules for this game here, something I really always appreciate in a long campaign game. But yeah, for today I think I will call it. And yeah, before I forget, a huge shout out to all of my patrons. I think I did that already. Maybe not. If so, better twice than not at all. And again, patrons and channel members, if you want to support my little channel, you will find a link to my page on Patreon. You can join me directly here on YouTube. There is a join button to join my community. There's a thanks button. You can donate on PayPal. Definitely like and subscribe or leave a comment. This also greatly helps the channel and is always appreciated. And with that being said, hope to see you soon in one of my other videos. And until then, bye-bye.